Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Billy, going all right? How about yourself?
Good, good. Yeah, did you have a good New Year's?
Yeah, it's been a good one. Felt like a long month, Like I went and seen my family a couple times in like Austin, Texas, and then there was like a work thing in Europe, and then just getting
Oh,
back to
wow.
like Denver now. And it's just, like I feel like I've been on the road for 5-ish weeks, and just like I'm exhausted.
Yeah, yeah, that does sound like a busy end of the year. I can imagine I would be like I feel like I'd be like crashing and sliding into the into the new year.
Oh yeah, it didn't help that like right when I went to go see my family again during Christmas, they were all sick, and so just like
Oh
whatever they
no.
had like hit me in the face, and it's just like, oh man, all I want to do is just like turn into like a burrito and take feeling for food.
Yeah. Yeah, you get a little sandwich tortilla wrap. Oh man.
Cool. What are you calling it from, Billy?
So I'm calling from Baltimore.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice.
What about you? Are you so you're based out of Denver, you said?
Yeah, Denver. I've been
Uh,
here like 6-ish months or so. Yeah, it's
oh,
pretty nice.
nice.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been to Colorado, but I've heard great things from everyone I know who's gone.
Yep, that's the same. Like I like a bunch of people were saying like it was so amazing. And I was like, all right, I gotta check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So we got another person joining. Hey, Ajit Kumar, how's it going?
Everyone. Hope I'm audible.
Yep, we can hear you.
S-
Cool.
Uh, do I need to open the video or it is fine?
It's fine. It's very, very
Because
optional
I'm
if you
kind
want
of,
to. Yeah,
yeah,
optional.
yeah, sure, sure.
Cool. Where are you calling in
Thanks.
from, Ajit? Where are you calling in from, Ajit?
I'm from India.
Ah, nice. Cool. Well, welcome. Uh, Looks like Philip's on the call as well.
Thanks.
Looks like Philip's on the call as
Yeah.
well. Cool. Let's
So,
get started.
shall we start?
Yeah, definitely. All right, Ajit, do you want to kick us off? I am hearing a little bit of feedback from your end, by the way.
Sure, 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 sure. So basically, what I'm doing, I mean, we are working for a product, which is basically to summarize, the project is basically managing some policies and not exactly policies, but kind of managing their infrastructure. And this infrastructure, we need to put in some policies on the basis of that. Whatever request user is making, I mean, similar whatever policies we are having, we wanted to implement ABAC. That policy implementation has already been done. I implemented everything, but that policy I did through VS Code. I mean, whatever development I do, I did it from VS Code. Now, since our policy size is being growing, we wanted to manage it through some tool, and there is no set uh, management tool for us. So we were kind of looking for some solutions, and I believe the founders of OPA were best suited for us. But now the problem is that we evaluated the product, and the free trial first, and then we found we have to basically uh, uh, take everything. I mean, whatever user information is there, we have to get that information into their system, into your login, I mean, into your application or somewhere. We have to get that system, we have to get this settings into your system, and then we can manage the policies. That is what we have understood so far. This was the first point. Second point was that basically now we were using Docker engine to evaluate the policies. So we were using that gatekeeper kind of setup. Now the problem is that sometimes our Docker engine restarts, maybe due to some deletions or something, then the policies are gone. We wanted to have some set of, I mean, do we have some automated policy pushing thing? We also evaluated one product like Opal, that also we evaluated, but somehow we thought your product is best suited for us, but we are not sure how we can use that to manage our policies. I hope
Cool.
little bit idea I have provided of our system.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me try to answer these. And so, I don't know that you asked a specific question as much as you kind of just expressed what you guys are doing. So, in the first point that you made, you said that you're using StyraDAS. I believe you didn't actually specifically say that, but you said the founders of OPA, which is so that's who I work for, and we have a tool called StyraDAS for managing policies. So I assume that is the tool you're referring to. So with that tool, yes, like that
That's
tool
correct.
is yeah, that tool is a centralized hub for your policies, right? So you do have to get the policies into StyraDAS. And so is your question that you want to write the policies elsewhere and just import them, and you want like a two-way sync?
Not exactly, not the policies, but the data which we are using. Let's suppose we have more than 25,000 users, and we don't want to import each and every user to this system. So
Yeah.
is there a possibility of not having?
Yeah, that's going to be called a data source. So you're gonna put a data source within StyraDAS. Do you have any? Are you working with an account manager?
Yes, we are working with Azure actually.
No, an account manager, like from the Styra side. Are you working with someone to help you implement your policies?
No, that I mean, I'm managing the policies, and we have a whole team who is having the policies, and we have a business team also who's getting the requirements, and we are, I mean, that is what this is all we are doing internally. We don't have any account manager for that.
Right. I just meant like someone, or were you working with a customer success agent to help you get your account started?
I don't think I'm getting your question correctly.
I'm assuming
Can you try to reframe, please?
You did like a self sign up on StyraDAS, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. If you did a self sign up, what we can do is I can have someone reach out to you and help you like finish the account setup, because it sounds like you have quite a lot of data and quite a lot of features. So it might be easier if someone from the customer success team reaches out to you.
Right. So this is the open policy agents community, like I guess office hours, and like we're happy to help you get stuff into StyraDAS, but that's probably best handled by people that do StyraDAS all the time. And I think that's kind of where we were going, Peter, was like this, let's focus on OPA questions specifically, and for questions about StyraDAS, it's best to direct those to the teams that do that all the time.
Yeah, this is technically an open source meeting. So we're supposed to focus on the open source tooling here.
Yeah.
But I will have someone reach out to you. Let me make sure I have your email. Is it apal@gerald.us?
That's correct.
Cool. Okay, I'll have someone from the StyraDAS team reach out to you and see if they can help you get fully implemented.
And then the second question sounded like something about policy distribution. Is that correct?
That's correct. So basically, yes. So we are currently using Docker for actually doing this policy implementation exactly, and into our the website where we are managing the policies and we are evaluating it. So now the Docker engine is basically, the problem is that it is getting restarted and we have to push the policies manually again. And we kind of put a I mean solution around it, but we don't think that it is a best suited solution. So if there is any other solution which you all think that could be a solution, I mean, suggestions are welcome. Right now what we did, we just put a resource around that, and we basically mounted a volume containing the policies, but the problem is that we have to manually push our policies into that volume and then mount those every time whenever this Docker engine starts.
So have y'all heard of the bundle system in OPA perchance?
Yes, I have heard of that.
That is the recommended way to distribute your policies. And it's actually the system that StyraDAS uses under the hood for distributing policies out to different instances and stuff. The system behind bundles is not horrendously complicated. basically builds a tarball with all of your policies and data in it. And optionally, you can put cryptographic signatures in there too, if that matters to you. But I would strongly recommend seeing if bundles are going to be a fit for your use case, because with that, you would just set up a single web server somewhere that has your policy bundle on it. And all of your OPA instances just query that server to see, hey, is there a bundle available? And then they'll automatically pull down the bundle, unpack it, load your policies up, and you're good to go. That is the recommended way to handle loading policies into OPA if you need to have a bunch of instances and they all should be running the same thing. Opal is kind of a different take on it, where they use the REST API, if I remember correctly, to shove policies over periodically. And that is not as well supported, but it works really well for some use cases. So I don't know, Peter, do you have anything else to interject there?
No, I think that kind of covers it. Yeah, I think bundles are like the kind of default go-to here. Yeah.
So currently we are not using bundles because our policy size is definitely huge, but we were actually struggling with using bundles on Docker, but definitely I mean, since it's a recommended way, and the thing which Philip suggests that we might have somewhere a server where we can push everything whenever there is a change. We can push the policies into that bundle server, and then from there we can pull out the policies.
I guess what I'm curious about is, are you like packing an enormous amount of JSON data into your bundles? Like, was that why this wasn't working so well for you, or was it a networking issue for all your containers?
I mean, the problem is that we were trying to basically we have an API server, and that is containing, we were using open what we say, let me put the word there. So we are using Swagger, actually. That's an open source, open API source. So we were using that structure, and that JSON which we use, that is pretty big because of our API size. We have multiple APIs. Now the problem is that we try to read this open API format into policies, but we were not able to do so. We have tried some examples, but there we failed. I mean, we were not able to utilize that open APIs format. Then what we did, we bundled these Swagger APIs, format everything, each and every detail into our policy itself. So now the policy is very big due to this, and due to this we were not able to kind of bundle everything into one place. So that is the issue with us. We were kind of trying to find a solution to use open API format in policies.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't have a nice clean answer for you.
Without actually seeing the API spec and how that was converted into Rego, it's hard to know there may be some optimizations, or there may be a different way of looking at it that's a little more like Rego specific, that might reduce the size of your policies quite a bit. That's something that we've seen over time, is as people get more experience with Rego, they're able to condense their policies quite a bit once they understand how the language works more. But these are things that would require a pretty intensive code review.
Do we want to pick up some questions from the other folks in the meeting?
Yeah,
quick, and then we can come back around if needed.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, Billy, you've been on since the beginning. Why don't you ask the next question? I think you're still on mute. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks so much for hosting these open sessions. My questions are, I'm kind of still just getting started with OPA, so they might be a little bit more abstract questions, like less specific to a particular implementation. But just for some context, part of the reason I stumbled onto OPA is I was sort of introduced to Prolog and sort of those kinds of like adjacent languages through computational contracts. And there's some really cool stuff happening in like Stanford Law's Codex sort of space, where they sort of have like another sort of Prolog adjacent language they call Datalog, I think. And so I was seeing like, hey, is there like a good open source alternative that could sort of fit into a similar niche? And for additional context, their kind of current application where they're sort of experimenting with this is like basically creating computable contracts for insurance policies. So part of the reason I was kind of interested in OPA, you know, is in addition to using it for like authorization for APIs, et cetera, is to see if like it could maybe sort of be extended to kind of fit this particular use case. And so one of the things that I was wondering, I kind of have a couple of general questions around it. Definitely don't expect to get to most of them or all of them. But one particular thing that I was kind of curious about, because it seems like a lot of the use cases that I've seen, OPA is really more of an internal tool that's sort of nested inside of an existing application, as opposed to more of like an external facing application. And so I was curious if you all had any kind of suggestions for, or if it would be more of an anti-pattern to say, hey, if we want to actually have like one hosted OPA server, like I know it seems like a lot of the sort of core design patterns is that you want the OPA policies as close to the tools that are instrumenting it, as opposed to having like one centralized authority. But if you know, theoretically, if you wanted to say, hey, like we want to actually have kind of one standard implementation of what like a contract would include, sort of formalizing that policy, like is there a way of saying, you know, these particular rules within an OPA policy could be exposed publicly versus these ones could be, you know, kind of private instances? And then kind of the sort of related question was, I was really intrigued by a lot of the use of schemas to like simplify the actual generation of OPA policies. But I was curious if like any of that schema validation could kind of be used on like the front end once the policy is exposed through the API. And I know those are kind of big questions. So even if you're just like, hey, take a look at these resources or this section, that would be like awesome.
So to answer your first question, can you have like public and private things?
Yeah.
The answer to that is currently no. The language as it stands, when you write up a bunch of Rego code and you put it on an OPA instance,
yeah,
OPA implicitly is creating an endpoint for every rule head that it can find. Okay. So you can't really hide it. I would recommend use like conventions for what's public versus private. Or the approach I've seen used in some of Styra's products is they'll usually have like a well-defined like set of, these are the things that we support as external interfaces. They'll have like a main or something that is like the main entry point, and then everything else is nested under that.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
That tends to be the common design pattern we've seen.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful.
You know, in the future, who knows? But currently, that's the state of the language. So.
Yeah. I'd also imagine there's probably a way, like if you were to embed a OPA policy, you could probably use OPA itself to like wrap some of those things in authorizations to sort of see, hey, is this like particular request coming in through for this path or whatever. But that's helpful to know kind of what's baked into the language currently.
Right. And your second question was, remind me.
So that, sorry, I should. So the second question was really more around schemas, I was like doing. I think I'm still sort of investigating like the use of some of the like the metadata capabilities. But one thing that really intrigued me was like the use of JSON schemas as a way of validating that a policy has implemented all the rules kind of expected. But I was curious if there was a way to kind of invert that and say, when a query to a particular rule is coming in, does that query supply all the data that is needed in order to be able to validate that? Because I know like right now, if you query an API or query a rule and you're missing some data, you just get back undefined, which like
correct.
It's not super clear whether it's like, oh, was I just missing something, or does this not actually like clear any of the, like meet any of the logic baked into the policy?
Right. So currently, no, schema support does not work that way. If it's something you think would be absolutely critical to a use case that's really important to you, you could definitely file a feature request issue and like outline like, hey, this is my use case. And I would love to have a feature that lets me accomplish this. And, maybe it looks like schemas, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But if you start the discussion, that is usually a fantastic way of like going, hey, like, what if this existed? And then the OPA
Yeah.
team will usually pop in and give their suggestions for how they think it could be best implemented. I know I've seen on the roadmap, there are plans to add increased schema support in the future. And it's just a matter of like when and where those things go in. There's definitely plans for better dependency management stuff, and JSON schema management is going to be part of that, is my understanding.
Yeah, those are like a lot of my kind of core questions, because obviously, like, I think what I was sort of envisioning is hacking the language in a bit of a way that's distinct from sort of like the intention, I imagine. But I like that it seems like it's a really robust, like policy language, and that seems relatively general purpose. So I just kudos to the work that you all have done. But yeah, also just wanted to kind of join this conversation because like I love the work that you all are doing and would love to kind of be an active member of the community. So thanks for hosting these spaces as well.
Okay.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Billy. If you don't have any other questions, Billy, I'm gonna jump over to Stephen. So yeah, Stephen, why don't you kick it off? What questions do you have?
Hi, can you see me? I just started my video. I don't know what was going on. I don't necessarily have any questions. I'm a solution architect, and like the use cases that I constantly hear about is like insurance, right? But it's this is a different tool. I'm getting my feet wet with this tool particularly. And so to Billy's question, it's like, hey, can this be like a canonical place or a single place where like policies are held and stored for like insurance policies and so forth? And so I'm just listening in, to be honest with you, nothing more.
Cool, awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Stephen. Yeah, and so like I think that's all the questions then, unless Billy or Ajit have more questions.
I did have one other one, and this maybe it's related to what Ajit was talking about, which is and I what you were talking about, Philip, with like the bundler, I think maybe is a piece of this. But I was wondering, and I think you also touched on like the dependency management piece, but I was curious if like in the roadmap you all had any sort of plans for saying, hey, like we recognize that a set of some common policies are reused like often across different organizations' policies, and having something like, hey, like, you know, the basics of authorizing a particular API call, right, are like, you'd probably want the same sort of rules baked in. Maybe the logic of them is a little bit different, but especially if you're using something like either a role or a scope based like authorization approach. And so I was kind of curious if you all had like plans for saying, hey, you know, we know that like this is like the sort of the canonical way to implement or instrument this particular approach, like for this sort of a policy, and like, you know, here's a good example, and like you can sort of import that and reference it, but then like configure the specifics of like, you know, supplying a particular data and data to say, hey, these are the users or these are the roles, and like, but you could just sort of repurpose that rule that like checks for, does this user appear in this role? I don't know if that makes sense, but
it sounds like you're kind of beginning to delve into entitlements type use cases, but so currently in OPA, the way that most folks manage most of their dependencies is by baking them in at bundle build time. You could think of that as like compile time in another language, except it's doing a textual, you know, baking in of the sources. Our dependency management looks a lot like in C when the preprocessor runs and it just generates a really huge, giant amount of text. There are plans on the roadmap, I believe, within the next year to implement dependency management where you can say, hey, I'd like to import from this other bundle or this other package that implements stuff. Again, we don't have like all the fine specifics laid out for it yet, and that's a system that's going to require some major architectural changes to make it be good and solid, but it is something that the team is actively thinking about. Yeah, and then as far as managing, I guess, like your config data, currently that's usually done by baking in like a data.json file that has like your user list or whatever. Or if you're using the Styra DAS product, you would use a data source, which looks to OPA like any other object or you know, place where you would expect to get data from. but under the hood can be a much more complex system. So yeah, those are the current options out there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I'm excited. Is there and forgive me if I just haven't stumbled onto this yet, but do you all have like kind of a public roadmap that where you're sort of outlining these things, or are they like, is it, or filing GitHub issues sort of like the best way, and then monitoring GitHub issues like kind of like the best current format for staying abreast as to like what kind of active discussions are happening?
I don't think we've posted a public roadmap in a while, mostly because we don't want to, overpromise and underdeliver kind of
totally.
thing.
Yeah, it looks like our roadmap kind of ends 2023 Q1. I think if this is still the current one. So yeah, we haven't really written out what 2023 looks like.
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah, and part of the reason I asked too is just because I'm still obviously pretty new to working with this, and maybe don't have quite the background I think that a lot of folks who have been working on it have, but I would love if there's an opportunity, like even for some, and I'll have to take a closer look at the GitHub already, but if there are like some good hey, first ticket issues that would be worth like tackling, would love to also contribute to the community as well, if that's something that's kosher and okay to do.
Yeah, definitely. Like the good first issues tend to get scooped up pretty quickly, at least like the fun ones anyway, right? Like there's always doc ones sitting around, but like the fun ones get scooped up pretty quickly. What's easier is if you, as you're playing with the tool, if you find that thing that you're like, this is kind of annoying, right? You'd be like, hey, I'd like to fix this, and like you should create the issue yourself, and the team can help guide you through fixing it. That tends to be a faster way to get those good first issues.
Cool.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
I'll 100% agree with that. Very often people will notice that like, hey, like in the built-ins list, there's a hole here. Like we need this thing and it's not here. Is this something that we could add? And that's a really common way to get your feet wet, because the built-ins tend to be self-contained and relatively straightforward to put together. A lot of people, myself included, that's how we got started. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for all the guidance.
Philip, I have a question. So I'm new to the space, fairly new. Is there like a proprietary standard for writing policies, maybe based on industry and so forth, right? Is there like a common way of creating policies? You mentioned JSON. You guys had conversations around JSON. But like,
are you like asking for, is there a standard policy format that's used in industry?
A language, a description language for policies in particular.
So currently, I don't think there's one that's like dominated the space so much that it's like, this is the standard and this is how we ship all policies always, right?
Got it.
Rego is becoming a de facto standard. I would say that it's like one of the top 3 currently from what I've personally seen. Most of the other formats are not quite as flexible. They tend to be things like table-driven policy formats, where your rules engine is literally just matching like 2 or 3 like fill in the blank, like field meets this condition and has this parameter fed in for the comparison function. And like a lot of the table-driven stuff works kind of like that. And if your use case fits into a table-driven rule set like that, great, good for you. But as soon as you like don't fit into that anymore, you start needing more general purpose programming facilities, then you're going to want to reach for something like Rego, because the flexibility gives you a lot of additional power.
So if we talk about like an entitlements table, like you mentioned, right? Would Rego be replacing like an entitlements table, or working in conjunction with entitlements?
You can do it either way. The language is flexible enough you could encode it either way. I think Styra actually has an entitlement system, and they do it as it's very much table driven. You feed in your table of users, usually as like JSON objects, and then the entitlement system, if you teach it how to pull out like I think the appropriate rules and stuff, or roles and stuff, it will figure everything out for you. You basically would want to most of the time encode your, I guess, like ABAC or RBAC rules and stuff in your data, and then have your policy fetch from that. The structuring of your data would be really important, though. You'll want to be very careful about how you do that, because depending on how you set up your data, it can be more or less efficient to search over. Think of this as kind of like database queries, where if you put a little bit of thought in on the front end, it's enormously more efficient and fast.
Got it.
Yeah.
Then is there this notion of policy conversion in this area, in this field? So if I have policies in Okta and they store it a specific way, like have we, or does something exist where we do like policy conversions ever?
Not in the open source OPA, but I know Styra has a couple proprietary products where they either have like a tool that can do a one-off conversion, or they have, in some cases, like data connector type things, which under the hood manage the conversion, but do it as kind of like a live updated thing for an open policy agent instance. I don't think there's been a huge amount of work in the open source space on this, but you may be able to find some one-off converters on GitHub here and there.
Got it. Awesome.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of interest in this space, and there's like a lot of really cool ideas and projects that are brewing. So it's very fun. And I expect to see a lot of really cool stuff in the future.
Yeah, I've had a ton of customers show interest in the space, and you know, it's a very difficult problem to tackle, right? And it's all about like these policies and how they're maintained, and you know, in what format, how they're constructed, right? And it's quite difficult for customers just in general to be able to convert one policy to another, or have two different systems, right, with two different policy sets, and then incorporate like users and policies and roles, right, and so forth, and being able to convert like from one system to another, having the same set of like policies or equivalencies between policies, right? And so yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting space to be in.
Yeah, currently the main advantage I would say of Rego is if you can get all of your user data into a nice kind of table-driven format, you can write one set of policies and then simply build on top of your base RBAC policy for all of your separate services. That's kind of the sell. You can kind of use abstractions to stretch a little further. Yeah.
In terms of like governance, if you think about like, could you talk about that a little bit more? Like
governance in terms of like how your policies are managed, or governance in terms of like the open policy agent project itself?
Open policy agent itself.
Okay. Peter, I'm going to pitch this one to you because I think you know a little more about the CNCF stuff than I do.
Yeah, definitely. And so so Philip and I both work for Styra, founders of Open Policy Agent, but the Open Policy Agent project, right, was donated to the CNCF Cloud Native Computing Foundation back in 2018, I think. And then it spent a couple years in the ecosystem, right? And then so the CNCF has kind of like governing rules, and right after about a couple of years, it became a graduated project, and that just that comes down to like number of users and number of maintainers and number of like there's a bunch of like things that check boxes you have to hit before you can become a graduated project. And so OPA as a CNCF project is graduated like Prometheus and Kubernetes and a couple of other like big ones that are becoming like standards for their use cases, right? And so as far as governance goes, technically the project is owned by the CNCF. Us at Styra are some of the maintainers of the OPA core project. And then there's a bunch of other companies maintaining various parts. Gatekeeper is a very popular part. That has like IBM and Red Hat.
I think Google too. Yeah.
Google from the core maintainers over there. And so like, so as far as governance goes, there's a couple, there's maintainers from various companies that are working on various parts of Open Policy Agent.
Got it. Cool. Awesome. You guys were at the Gartner event, right? In Las Vegas a few weeks ago.
I'd imagine so.
People. I think we had people there.
I don't know who was there, but someone was there. We got mentioned as like the Open Policy Agent project or Styra. I forgot. One of the two things got mentioned in the Gartner report, and so someone went.
Yeah. Cool. I saw you guys there. So
cool. Do you know who you bumped into, or?
Those two gentlemen, I don't remember their names though.
But
Yeah,
it was Tim. I bet Tim was over there. Yeah.
maybe.
Looks like Billy, I think, needs to head out. So,
Cool.
Cool.
all right.
Thanks for joining, Billy. Thanks for joining,
Yeah,
Stephen.
it was nice meeting
Ajit.
everyone.
Yeah, good to meet everyone. Talk to you next time. Bye.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.